Hey everyone, welcome back. Today, we're doing an explainer on a buzzword you literally hear everywhere. I mean, it's tossed around in casual conversation, all over social media, and every advice column. Yep, we're talking about narcissism. But what does it actually mean? Beyond just being a trendy insult for someone who's maybe a bit too into themselves. Okay, let's dive into this, distill the source material, and separate the pop culture myth from the actual psychological reality.
Now, it is incredibly easy to look around our modern world with the endless selfie culture, the perfectly curated feeds, the constant self-promotion, and ask, are we all just a little too obsessed with our own image? It definitely feels like a uniquely modern problem, right? But to really understand narcissism, we actually have to rewind a few thousand years. Way before the front-facing camera was even a thought, the ancient Greeks and Romans were already tackling this exact human tendency.
So, the term itself actually ties back to the ancient myth of Narcissus and Echo. The story goes that Narcissus was this remarkably handsome guy wandering the world looking for love. He ends up rejecting a nymph named Echo, and shortly after he catches a glimpse of his own reflection in a river. And, well, he falls completely, hopelessly in love with it. He's literally so captivated by his own image that he just can't tear himself away, and he actually drowns right there. Legend says a flower marked the exact spot where he died, which is why, to this day, we call it the Narcissus. It's a tragic story for sure, but it beautifully captures the core idea, elevated and ultimately destructive self-involvement.
Section 1. From Myth to Psychology. Transitioning from myth to science, psychologists view narcissism as much more than just a casual personality quirk. It's classified as an inflated, grandiose self-image. Psychologists study this as a specific set of traits. A narcissistic individual genuinely believes, down to their core, that they are smarter, better looking, and just flat out more important than everyone else around them. And because they truly believe they're superior, they firmly believe they deserve special treatment. They're not just acting arrogant to mask insecurities. Actually, no, this is their fundamental, rigid view of reality.
Section 2. The two faces of narcissism.
Psychologists actually divide this personality trait into two very distinct categories: grandiose narcissism and vulnerable narcissism. Grandiose is the one we're probably all familiar with. It's extroverted, dominant, and super attention-seeking. These are the folks who actively pursue power and status. They often end up as leaders, politicians, or celebrities because they crave the spotlight and the status it effortlessly brings. But on the flip side, we have vulnerable narcissism, and this one might actually surprise you. These individuals can be really quiet and reserved. They still harbor that exact same strong, silent sense of entitlement, but they are incredibly easily threatened or slighted by other people. So it's a totally different outward presentation of the exact same underlying grandiosity.
To really grasp the long-term dark side of both types, look at this quote from our source material. It's like a disease where the sufferers feel pretty good, but the people around them suffer. Narcissists generally act in their own self-interest. In the real world, this means grandiose leaders might make wildly risky or unethical decisions just to boost their own status. In personal relationships, narcissistic partners can be fundamentally dishonest or unfaithful. And if someone challenges their rosy self-view, watch out, because they can become deeply resentful and aggressively defensive. It's this profound lack of empathy that makes it so damaging to the people in their orbit.
Section 3. Narcissistic Personality Disorder, or NPD.
And this brilliantly illustrates just how rare true narcissistic personality disorder actually is. We're talking about maybe 1 to 2% of the entire population having clinical NPD. Now, it's worth noting that while kids and teenagers can be incredibly self-centered, that's often just a normal part of human development. True NPD is a serious clinical diagnosis strictly reserved for adults. So while you'll probably encounter a lot of people with narcissistic traits, the actual disorder is quite uncommon. Oh, and the data shows it affects men more frequently than women.
So how do psychiatrists diagnose that tiny 1 to 2%? Well, they use the American Psychiatric Association's DSM-5, looking for key traits: a grandiose view of oneself, severe problems with empathy, a massive sense of entitlement, and this insatiable need for admiration. But the absolute crucial point here is that merely having these traits doesn't equal the disorder. It becomes a clinical disorder only when these traits completely hijack a person's life and cause massive, destructive relational problems. Imagine using your own family literally just as an audience, or exploding at a coworker who tries to offer constructive feedback. That's when it crosses the line into a clinical disorder.
Section 4. The Roots of Narcissism.
So what actually causes someone to develop these traits? It's a classic mix of nature and nurture.
First up, genetics play a surprisingly large role. Twin studies show a strong genetic link even if scientists haven't pinned down the exact genes quite yet. Then there's the environment, specifically parenting styles. Parents who constantly put their kid on a pedestal, inflating their ego, can inadvertently foster that extroverted, grandiose narcissism. On the flip side, cold and controlling parents can contribute to vulnerable narcissism, where the child essentially builds a grandiose self-image just to cope with that lack of warmth. And lastly, there's a broader cultural piece to the puzzle.
Tracking cultural shifts in the U.S., researchers found that narcissism is higher in cultures that heavily emphasize individuality. In America, narcissism as a personality trait has been steadily creeping up since the 1970s. We moved away from the communal focus of the 60s straight into the self-esteem movement and rising materialism of the 70s. And today, well, we have social media. Now, let's be totally objective here. The evidence does not definitively say social media causes narcissism. Instead, it acts like a massive amplifier. It simply gives people who are already highly narcissistic a super efficient platform to constantly seek out that social status and attention they crave.
Section 5. The Path Forward.
Which brings us to the final, crucial question we need to ask today. If someone is hardwired to believe they are utterly flawless and superior to everyone else, can they actually improve on those deeply ingrained negative traits?
The answer, thankfully, is a resounding yes. Improvement is absolutely possible. It is by no means a lost cause. But how do they actually pull that off? The absolute key involves anything that promotes honest reflection on their own behavior. Psychotherapy is a huge tool here. The focus has to be on actively practicing compassion toward others and, slowly building up that missing empathy. But I do have to caution you, this is incredibly challenging work. For someone with true narcissistic personality disorder, continually working on self-betterment really goes against their very nature.
And that brings us to our final takeaway, perfectly captured in this quote from our source material. For a narcissist, self-reflection is hard from an unflattering angle. Think about it. If your entire worldview is built on this flawless reflection of yourself, acknowledging your true flaws requires an immense, painful amount of courage. It really leaves us with a provocative question. In a culture that increasingly rewards self-obsession and relentless self-promotion, how do we protect our own empathy before the reflection takes over? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.